So I want to talk a little bit more about AEW and this whole controversy regarding the world title. And one thing I want to mention with Tony Khan is that there are people who have that expression, like they say in Family Guy, of if you are going to shit on something or if you have a piece of shit as a piece of work, we can respect a person for standing by it because at least they're being honest that they want to stick with their guns really. And then also, if people know that their work is a piece of shit and they call it a piece of shit, we can respect that. And what that really means is that sometimes we respect somebody by being stubborn and being like, no matter what I want to do, I want to do what I want to do, even if it's low quality or I don't care what other people have to say, really. Sometimes that is commendable because in life you can't always change for people. But as the old saying goes in business, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I like what some people say about WWE is that when it's WrestleMania season, they have to learn how to pivot. Like I think they wanted to do Roman versus The Rock, but they changed it to Roman versus Cody Rhodes because that's what the fans wanted. Years ago, they changed it from Batista versus Triple H to Batista versus Bryan Danielson versus Randy Orton because that's what the fans wanted. And they changed it to Kofi Mania one year, because they know that's the biggest show of the year. They have to really create that big WrestleMania moment, and they don't want people just not watching it because they know that that's their biggest draw. That's usually when people will stick around and watch WWE after WrestleMania. And sometimes you get people who will watch for years and years, and sometimes, if you have a bad WrestleMania, like when The Undertaker was defeated, then you're going to lose a lot of people. Like they know that they have to give to the fans. And I think that with AEW, they really don't have that sense. I think that it's really, like as some people say, it's an audience for one. It's somebody who may have a mentality of, I just want to, like the criticism is long-term vision. So they may be like, hey, we don't want to switch things around because we're going against our philosophy of people wanting long-term vision. But I also think that the other part of it is Tony not understanding when a long-term vision works and doesn't work. If there was a storyline like Swerve and Hangman, who are two compelling characters, if they kind of, work together or they kind of become rivals instead of just, people who want to kill each other, I think people would want to see that story over something with the Death Riders where it's not been working and it's just a long-term story that people don't care about. Like, for example, I think people talk about Foley and The Undertaker. Like, that's a great long-term story that ended with, Hell in a Cell, really. That's a great long-term story, but a bad long-term story is the aces and eights in TNA wrestling, really. Like, sometimes you have to really factor in, is the story helping the company or is it hurting the company? And not stubbornly change. And then also, I'll talk to you guys about Mrs. Bailey, who was my sixth grade teacher. And what happened was that I had a homework assignment. She made me rewrite it 30 times. And the point of that is that there are people who don't understand that one of the reasons why, like Tony Khan and writers don't like to change their work or they don't want to change direction is because you're forcing them to sit down and think. You're forcing them to be like, hey, Tony has so many other responsibilities and he has so many headaches that he may be like, no, I'm sticking with Death Riders because I'm spread out too thin, really. You're expecting me to change everything. I don't know how to change things. It's just stressful and annoying. And it almost feels like, having Mrs. Bailey, who, when I did a homework assignment where I had to spend $1 million in New York City, she was like, okay, she made me rewrite it 30 times, really, and there were other homework assignments and other classes that I had to work as well, really. And I remember my dad just calling school and saying, hey, just stop this, because even though you believe in my potential, really, that's something you do in college. That's like a master of writing student type of thing, really, where you got to rewrite something like 30 times or whatever, not a sixth grader and not like somebody who has other classes at the time, really, but it inspired me not to live up to my full potential, really, because, people are going to be that meticulous or be like, oh, well, you're gifted or you can go somewhere. We're going to make you rewrite something like 30 times, and that's not even like age appropriate. That's just kind of why, why when you have people like Tony Khan, he doesn't want to change Death Riders, because that means, he has so many other responsibilities that he, he doesn't want to give this up, really, because then that means he has to rewrite a couple of things, or, he just wants to have power over storylines and other ideas. So he's like, no, we're going to do what I want to do, because if I change things or I cancel things, it just means that I allow the crowd to dictate what I do. Or in the end of the day, really, I set up a couple of things that maybe the wrestlers want to do. Like, maybe the Young Bucks do want to come back as villains. Maybe, Hangman Adam Page and Swerve want to be a tag team. Or maybe, we have Anarchy in the Arena, and then there's also Blood and Guts coming up. So we need to set up multiple people to make sure, those things like work well, so he doesn't want to like change things to make people happy, because then he has to change a lot of just, maybe pre-planned ideas, really. And I think that's what people don't understand. That's probably the big reason for it. But I really think that, it's detrimental because, again, you don't have a world heavyweight championship picture, because it's almost like who's going to be in the world, who's going to like take the title off of Moxley. And here's the problem. Moxley's philosophy is the younger talent. Like, I think that right now, the best person to take the title off of Jon Moxley, surprisingly, is Anthony Bowens, because his philosophy and the philosophies Moxley's trying to make the younger talent stand up, really. Bowens is somebody who I feel that, has been with the company for a very long time. He's been resilient. They're repackaging him. He's not gone away for a while like Darby Allin, really. Daniel Garcia, you just gave him a title, and he's not really done anything with it, really. And, Orange Cassidy has a character where he just takes wrestling non-seriously. And then Ospreay and all the other wrestlers, Ospreay, Jay White, Adam Copeland, Hangman Adam Page, Swerve Strickland, all those guys, are not the people that Moxley wants to beat him, because they're all like former AEW champions, or they're established in other companies. That Anthony Bowens would be the star to take out Moxley if you really wanted to go with his philosophy of a new young talent, really. But I don't think they'll push Anthony Bowens to do that. And I also feel that another thing, too, is that you got to worry about the AEW roster, because there are maybe some people that may be like, because it's just like with Hobbs and other wrestlers where they have a lot of potential, like Hobbs and Wardlow, that they have a lot of potential, but they go to the mercy of what Tony wants to do or what the EVPs want to do. Like, there's a reason why you have a lot of skinny-ass wrestlers like the EVPs doing what they want to do, but they don't have something like Hobbs or Wardlow, two wrestlers that have been built up as big, jacked wrestlers who can take out multiple people, be on top, so it's definitely, it's definitely just, like a mess, really, and that's also another thing we worry about is, that is, they're going against their philosophy of what the Death Riders want is younger talent standing up. And I also think that they're going up against, there's a lot of backstage politics, really. And I think that that's also what's hurting AEW, is that I think that Tony wants to do what he wants to do. And I also feel that there's a lot of just, maybe the Young Bucks and other people involved just saying like, hey, I'm going to incorporate myself in the story, really, now, and we're going to see what happens. And I also just want to say that I think that another big detriment to AEW is this clearly shows that they don't care, and then also that they're not, they're very like tone deaf with the time, really. Like right now with Dynasty, that is a very important pay-per-view. That's one of the most important pay-per-views that they have, because it happens in April. April is WrestleMania season, and what people will say is that if Dynasty sucks, then it gives them more of a it gives people more of a motivation to watch WrestleMania and then watch WWE after WrestleMania. And then also there's 3 shows. There's 2 nights of WrestleMania, and then there's 1 night of NXT. And with NXT, they have to know that they have to make sure NXT is a big deal, really, to steal that AEW and TNA and, Combat Zone Wrestling and New Japan audience, really, So, with AEW, they had to be like, okay, they'll make a show before WrestleMania, and they have to make sure that show knocks it out of the park to steal some of that WrestleMania crowd, and they didn't do it this year. And then the other thing too is that they have a crazy couple of months. You have Supercard of Honor in Atlantic City, and that's a very detrimental show because that's not a big area of the country. It's hard to get to Atlantic City, so I do wonder what their draw is going to be. Then you have instead of like the Boston Garden, where the Celtics play, you're going to like the Fenway Theater or something like that. So now you're on Boston show, you're going to a small theater, and if people don't like this, what's going to happen. And then also you have Fyter Fest in Denver in June, and it's like, okay, well, Denver is a very populated city. How's that going to draw? Phoenix is a populated city, and one of the bad things about Double or Nothing is you're not going to Vegas, and the reason why you're not going to Vegas is because they're having WrestleMania, so you're kind of worried about, double dipping in Vegas because WWE has 3 shows there, the 2 WrestleMania shows, and then you also have the NXT Stand and Deliver show. So, how are they going to draw well in Phoenix, Arizona? And then also too, you have the All In show, and that's also a bad one because what happened during the kickoff event. There's a rumor that they had less than 50 fans, and when they launched AEW in Jacksonville years ago, they had over 1,000 people. And I did not look at, and the recent ticket report that I saw, a few months ago was that they sold maybe over 11,000 tickets, to a 50,000 seat arena. So are they going to pull a AEW Grand Slam where they're going to say, okay, the big show of the year, we're going to make it like AEW Grand Slam because we're not drawing as much really, and we're going to go to a small theater to save money. They already changed the hours of the AEW All In Texas because WWE has a show later that night because they don't want to kind of like, divide the crowd really, so yeah, with like putting the title on Moxley and incorporating the Young Bucks and making it a confusing direction. And, sadly, there were a lot of people at the pay-per-view who were actually walking out before the AEW match, before the main event, for 2 reasons. That people felt like, Bandito and Jericho was the right main event, really, because they got happy with Bandito. And then people just saw Speedball and Kenny Omega and Ricochet and people like that, really. And then people were like, okay, well, why am I going to watch the main event to be disappointed? Why am I going to watch the main event after a show that ends at 12:30, really, And if you stayed from the beginning, the kickoff event, that's a 5.5 hour show. And then Swerve wants to stay at the very end, really, So it's like sad that people were walking out. And then also, too, like, the ending of the show had the last line of the show was fuck Booker T, So now you have, another issue as well, really, where the only way AEW gets attention is by saying things like fuck Booker T, so that way we keep the controversy alive. And that's one of the reasons why they do stuff like that, is because their show doesn't really draw people, so they're definitely tone deaf. They definitely want to do what they want to do. They don't really want to challenge themselves. And a lot of people have to understand that, good writing is easy and filmmaking, good composition is easy, but there's a reason why you have a show like The Sopranos, and the reason why you have a show like The Sopranos is because not a lot of people want to live up to that high standard. There's a reason why there's one Stanley Kubrick, because there's not a lot of people who want to live up to that standard because it's a pain in the ass to do that. But the end result is you get great quality. And I think with AEW, they don't want to go that direction really for, many reasons of backstage politics, of sensitive egos, of also Tony being so busy that he spreads himself too thin, that he doesn't want to have somebody else. And I also feel like Tony has some social phobia. And I have that too as well, where, like there are people who are like, I wrote something great, and then you work with other people and the other people are like, no, even if you wrote a masterpiece, I'm going to take your story, I'm going to crap on it, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and then the quality gets ruined. So yeah, I really think they really need to like look at this Death Rider thing and say, hey, you know what, the next, they can end it at Double or Nothing. They can end it at Double or Nothing, and that be that, really. Or they can continue it through AEW All In and understand that now they have some very bad momentum, and they can build a good, compelling storyline to end it at Double or Nothing. And I think that's the best choice, really. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think that, as I said, stubbornly, they're going to end it at AEW All In. And if they really want to kill the company, they should do what Vince did with Brock Lesnar and with Roman Reigns. They should be like, hey, it's not going to be All In 2025. It's going to be 2026. But I don't think they're going to have a company after that if they continue what they're doing, really. So it's definitely a very tone-deaf decision. It's definitely, highlights a lot of issues with AEW. And then also, too, when Swerve said fuck Booker T, to me, it was also another sad thing you see with AEW, that the only attention that they get is wrestlers trying to go after shock value and pick beefs with people instead of actually a show that has a compelling narrative, So, these are my further thoughts of it. It was a detrimental choice to not put it on Swerve. It was a stubborn choice. It's killed a lot of goodwill with this company, and people need to protest AEW by not watching and not going to the shows, because then eventually they'll learn, hey, Double or Nothing has to be when we fix all this, and that be that, really.